what are going to be the very fastest, most effective, efficient routes for mining aluminum, and what are the areas that are the most bountiful within the Haga Basin region? Well, we're going to answer all those questions in this ultimate guide to quickly, effectively mining unlimited amounts of aluminum in the best way, using the best routes. These will save you a ton of time over the period of your playthrough, as well as lots of good little bits of knowledge, tips and tricks. But this is going to be the perfect guide if you've gotten your legendary buggy up and running and you're just starting to mine aluminum. Pretty sure you'll get something from this. If you do at all, consider liking and subscribing. It goes a really long way. Let's go. Well, for starters, the Eastern Shield Wall and the Western Shield Wall will always be the best locations that have ample, unlimited amounts of aluminum. But what we want to know is, what is the fastest, best routes? But before we jump into that, it's worth noting there are only 3 entries in the Western and Eastern Shield Wall, and one of those is right here, up in the top right corner of Owadam. The next one is in Mysar Terrell, right here, and the third and last entry into the most bountiful region of aluminum is right near the Pinnacle Station, where you can go up through here into the Eastern Shield Wall. Other than those 3 entryways, the only other way is to lift your vehicle using an ornithopter, or alternatively, you could put on a rattle boost and carry your storage in your inventory and rocket ship over to these locations. However you get here, critical thing is having a buggy with at least a buggy storage Mark III and a buggy cutter array Mark IV. These, along with your buggy, is all we're going to need. But there is no limit to how much fun you can have with these little monster trucks. From barrel rolls, the lasers in the eyes, these are the absolute workhorse and backbone to Dune Awakening. But it's just worth noting, those are the entryways. Something to consider if you're thinking of migrating and building a base. But let's continue. This is particularly going to be extremely helpful for all the bases and people located in this region and these regions. If you have your base up high in the Eastern Shield Wall or the Western Shield Wall, you pretty much can't go wrong. There's aluminum everywhere. You don't really need a guide or any help. And we will begin our run right here. But before we go any further, let's go through a little bit of details and understand some of the things we need to consider if we're going to be mining tons of aluminum and we want to do it effectively, efficiently, and fast. To understand what the best routes will be, we have to quickly touch on how the node spawns work, as well as the Coriolis Storm and what the impacts are on the various nodes. However, the routes I'm going to show you will pretty much always be the best routes, regardless of which rotation we're in. And rotation is the key word, because it's important to understand how these nodes work. Each week, the Coriolis Storm is going to reset the spawns of all the various nodes. 80% of the resource nodes are simply just going to change their resource type that is allowable within the region. As you would have discovered, most of the regions and the resources and the various ore deposits are all region locked. So for example, we have 4 nodes here. Generally, these 4 nodes are always going to be here each week. All that's going to change is that granite might change to aluminum, this aluminum might change to basalt, and so on. This is the case for about 80% of all the nodes. There are a few that will disappear and reappear. So in another example, these 4 nodes spawn one week. Next week, you only might have 3. However, roughly between 80 to 90% of the nodes will always remain in their exact spot. And the other most important aspect to understand about the nodes and how they respawn Coriolis Storm is that, from my understanding, it's not randomly generated. They will cycle through each week a predetermined set, meaning after a few weeks, we should start to notice a pattern and find that the route we took 2 weeks ago is the exact same route we need to take this week. As all the nodes have changed and rotated to be exactly the same as it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, a month, allowing for the exact same route to be used. So at the moment, there should only be a predetermined set amount of cycles. So within a month or 2, we should start seeing the exact same rotation and familiar configurations of nodes. And why is it so important to understand this? Well, it just simply means each week, some routes are going to be way more efficient, faster, providing the shortest amount of distance you have to travel to fill up your truck. If you really want to make your trips shorter, you really want to get to Planetologist level 3 with the 20% mining yield and the cut and ray mining yield. Just to give you an example of why this is so potent. If you have a Mark IV buggy cutter array and you're storing it in the Mark IV buggy boot, which has a capacity of 2,000. With none of the perks, you're looking at 23 nodes. With both the perks at level 3, we're talking 16 nodes. The travel distance can be quite huge between just those few different nodes of having the perks and not. If you can cut down your travel time, even by a few minutes, by knowing the best routes, as well as having the most critical perks, you're going to save yourself possibly hours upon hours over your playthrough. There's about a 50% increase just going from the Mark IV laser cutter to the Mark V, and you can turn that 23 nodes into 11 nodes required if you have both perks. You can see how the scaling can really shorten the time you need in order to complete a run. Changing it to the Mark V buggy boot, 2,500 capacity, we can get it down to 14 nodes, then 16 nodes to fill the boot with 3,000 capacity. Insane. Then you throw in the Mark VI buggy cutter array with both perks, we can get it down to 11. That takes no time at all, especially with these routes. And then looking a little deeper, if we start seeing how many ingots we can get per load, obviously the Mark VI with level 3, each run can give us 750 ingots on the large refiner and 428 on the medium. But if we get the Mark V with both level 3, 189 per node, with the Mark V buggy boot, 2.5 capacity, 14 nodes. And then there's a huge difference obviously between the large refiner and the medium refiner, but most people can be getting 357 ingots per run. Compare that to none. That's an extra of 5 nodes you have to mine, which doesn't sound like a big difference, but ultimately it really is. You certainly will have to travel a lot further, increasing your time and overall slowing production down. So in order to mine aluminum, we at least need a buggy cutter array Mark IV, which works perfect on your buggy Mark III. Technically, there's no problems, and I've tested this running the Mark VI buggy cutter array on your humble buggy Mark III, particularly solo. You won't notice any difference other than the wear and tear, and it will just run a bit hotter. You'll still be doing the runs at nearly the same speed. Heat isn't so much an issue because you're solo, switching the engine off and on between your cycles, which does reduce the heat. But as you can see, I threw on the Mark III power and engine while using the Mark VI cutter array, and ultimately there was just no real difference. So just so you know, you can really push the use and limits of getting by with the very basic buggy and just trying to smash through and get the best laser cutter you can, as well as focusing on the boot. The storage also just as important, but it's a good thing to know. Mix and matching, very good idea and very efficient way to get ahead. So I highly recommend going for your buggy cutter array Mark IV. Now you can find plenty of these around certain areas of the map. And just to give you some idea of where the Mark IV buggy cutter array can be found, you can see in these locations, you have a very good chance of finding them in locations like the Imperial Testing Station, number 60, the Atreides bases, Passage of Artemis, or the Aegis. And same again for the Mark V, Heroes Testing Station number 163, and the Beast Claw. At all these locations, you'll be able to get a Mark V, Mark IV at the Imperial Testing Station number 60. But ultimately, as long as you're hanging out in the Western Shield, Eastern Shield, or Owadam, you should at least come across the Mark IV. You've got a very good chance, if you spend a bit of time in any of these locations, to find one without having to craft it. Better yet, getting the Mark V, particularly from the Atreides base, either of them in the Western Shield Wall. If you've seen my video, these are very easy spots to farm. You have a very good high chance of being able to pick one of these up if you farm it quite regularly. And same again for the Harkonnen base, I would hit those spots. And I'll just quickly show you, if you do want to farm the Atreides base to try to get the Mark V buggy cutter array. When it comes to farming any of the Atreides bases within Haga Basin, the method will always be the same. This is pretty much the quickest way. We're just going to land on top on the left-hand side, and that will make a little bit more sense later, but we're just going to quickly jump down again, quickly grab the band, double jump or jump up. We're going to run across here, quickly jump down. There'll be some mines. We'll pick up the chest, and then it's just a matter of doing the exact same in reverse. This time we'll just jump straight into the ornithopter. So the whole process only takes under 30 seconds. Very quick place to loot, and you're out of there. It's worth noting you don't need an ornithopter. The method will still be the same. So if you can get to these locations or near them, you can get way ahead, way faster by picking up a buggy cutter array Mark V, or just go to the store and see if anyone is selling any of them. Generally, you'll find one or two. Spending 50 to 80,000 to get a Mark V buggy cutter array just as you enter the aluminum stage is so freaking huge. It's well worth the investment. So let's move on to the very best routes. Okay, so for the best routes, we are starting at this location right here, which is at the bottom of the Iron Watch, close to the Crossroads trade post, right here. And we're not going to mine them, but I'm just going to drive through. So this week, currently, we have 1, 2 nodes, 3 nodes, and this is going to be the very best route for this week. Now, generally, this route is going to be excellent regardless of which week. This is pretty much my priority or the best one I've found because there's so many different nodes, and regardless of which configuration, you'll always find plenty of aluminum on this route. So with all that said, I'll just show you. We're going to whip up here. Now, what I do not recommend though, is if you've just gotten to your aluminum stage, getting these first 2 nodes can be challenging because you can be attacked by enemies, but you can sort of get through and you'll find another 2 nodes here. So these guys are attacking. So this is why it's not suggested early on. You could skip these nodes or just engage with them and take them out. And just so you know exactly where we are on the map, we are right next to Thieves Triumph, which is pretty much a base, and we are sitting right next to these aluminum ore. What is that, 5, 6 nodes? So now we're just going to reverse and we're going to drop down here and you're going to find another 3 nodes. Continuing on here, we have a little bit of a distance between where we'll get to, but there is a couple extra nodes along the way. And again, this will change. There's normally a node right there, but someone's already mined it. But we're just going to keep going. It looks like someone's already entered this area. So it could be a little bit challenging to show you, particularly on the weekend because it's so busy. But just to give you an idea, we have 2 more nodes up here. And if we come up the little section here, you'll turn around up onto this sort of cliff and you'll find another 2 nodes. And then if we jump off this edge, keep in mind you have no vehicle damage from dropping off any kind of height within this game. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. To me, it is kind of freaking awesome. I love that we don't have vehicle damage from dropping or ramming or anything like that. And all we're doing is we're heading up here now. And this spot is always going to be pretty much one of the best for aluminum because you have 1, 2, 3, 4 nodes just here. And this is going to rotate. So sometimes there's even more nodes. And then you'll also have 2 nodes down here. And if we go a little bit further up, you'll see that there's just so many more nodes. So if you had a Mark IV buggy cutter array and a Mark 3 or 4 boot, you will need quite a lot of nodes, but this path will pretty much ensure that you have enough nodes regardless of where you're up to. This is why it's pretty much ultimately the best path to take for your at least first run, because it will be one of the most bountiful runs. Now we can extend this run and keep extending it. And I'll just show you as we drive around. So 2 more nodes, but ultimately you'd pretty much finish there and return back because you would be full. Just to show you on the map quickly, this is the route we've taken. We've gone through this area and we're ended up right here, right next to the wreck of the Electo. Great spot for it. Now here is the next route, starting from the same location again, but this time we're going to be kind of like weaving through this area here and making our way up all the way around, kind of doing like a circuit. And this is a great alternative if the first route is being mined at the same time, but it could also just happen to be that this route would be more potent in certain cycles. So it's really good to know. So we're just going to be driving up and doing the same thing again, just ignoring the nodes just so I can show you. So instead of going straight this time, we're going to be hooking a left and going up this sort of layered ramp landscape as we wind through this area. A couple nodes there, depending on which week. And if we go and have a look towards this point of interest, you can find anywhere between 2 to 4 different nodes. You can see there's quite a few nodes here. At the moment, there is 5 nodes down there for aluminum, which you would go and mine. Now, if we keep going on, we do have an option to go right, depending on which way you want to go. But here, we're going to go left, and we're just going to be climbing. Now, you can see this route is a bit different. There's another node, as it has more spread out area to cover between each node. It's very funky looking base there. But you can see you still get plenty, but it's just going to take a little bit longer because they're not all sort of clumped together like that other location. There's a few key spots though that are most critical to hit, as they'll have the most deposits. But as you can see here, there's one here. Sometimes that will be 2 aluminum, but we'll climb to the top. Now, one of the better areas for this route is going to be in this corner here to the left, just avoiding the guys so they don't shoot at the vehicle, depending where you're up to, can be a thing. But you can see here we have 1, 2, 3 nodes. And then if we go further up, there'll be an additional 2 nodes or just, 2 nodes. Sometimes this can be predominantly just aluminum. So you could have a lot of nodes there to harvest. And that's probably one of the best spots, this area here. for this route. As we continue along, heading for that tower, you'll find a couple nodes along the way, one here on the left, one on the right, and we'll just continue on down this area. And we'll sort of find a bit of a barren part here, as generally there's not any nodes. I don't really ever see that copper node being one, but it could be. And now we have a couple variations of where we can go. So ultimately, if we have a very low level cut array, say the Mark IV, we would probably want to go to the left, down and around, and enter that area we covered in Route 1, and then head back out. So that would be one way to get the most amount of nodes possible, and that works very well if you have a low level cutter array. So just quickly show you what going left will be like, and then we'll come back to that very spot and continue on with the other route. You can see here, there's some nodes, and the other route, you pretty much just go down there and you would almost be ready to go home, because there's only a couple more nodes that way. But if you're still stretched and you need to fill your boot more, this is the way I would go. I would turn left at the top as we've just done, and would continue down, and you'd find quite a few nodes. This can be very bountiful. Sometimes you get 4 or 5 aluminum nodes, depending on what cycle we're in. And as we continue down, we'll just sort of speed it up a little bit, because this part is a little bit of a barren area. Generally not too many nodes here, but you'll see we quickly link into that other bountiful area. That is pretty much the prime spot. So a couple different ways to get there, and this can be helpful to know, because if other people are doing the exact same thing, then you can probably try the alternative route and be able to sync to their timing and just have a much better experience with your aluminum mining. And you can see we're right back here where we came to for the first route. So opening the map again, this is where we are, tons and tons of it around here. Then after hitting this spot, we'll be doing the exact same thing, just going back out the way we came in the first route, whichever way you want to take. So just coming back to that spot before we went on the longer detour, if we hook a right, there'll be quite a few nodes, ways we can go about this. And that's why it's just going to be up to you how you want to explore it. But there'll be a couple nodes along these sort of rock formations, and then we also have the 3 nodes that we visited previously on the first route, which you can see just there. If we double back a little bit and then go down this way just past the Keith's base or Keith's triumph, you could go up here and you would find a few extra nodes. Now there is one little cheeky bit here that you can see, there's one node there, but if you keep going, you'll sometimes find 2 nodes very nicely stuck up behind here. But at the moment, there's only one. And then if your buggy's full, you can pretty much just sort of jump off here. And depending on what time of day it is, because the node spawns will be quite quick, depending on what time of day it is or how populated the server is, you could finish your route by exiting here to the right, which you started on the left, and on the right there'll be a few more nodes, and that would definitely have your buggy completely stacked with everything you need. But those are some of the main routes you can take if your base are in those locations we mentioned. These are by far some of the most proficient areas to get your buggy to, because if we look on the map and enter from this other side, say from Haga Rift, and go into these areas, the aluminum's quite sparse. I would almost be just heading over to this side. But if you do go further up, you'll notice on the eastern shield wall, a lot of the deposits are isolated to some of the rock formations that are much more difficult to get to with your vehicle, which ultimately means you're probably just doing a little bit more driving around. But there's also just so many different nodes up here. You don't really have any issues finding aluminum, but a lot of these areas, say like this heavily congested area, much more difficult to access with a vehicle. That's why the routes I showed you are some of the very best. And I just wanted to add, there are so many different routes and ways we can go, but ultimately these regions around here and a little bit around here are some of the best and most accessible. And when you first get to the aluminum stage, and you're on your bike, I would still come to these locations with the Cutter Array Mark III and just hand mine these. So you might have to do 1 or 2 runs just on the sand bike to get enough to be able to build your first buggy. But more importantly, you're going to need to visit Haga Rift, get your aetherite crystals or your cobalt. Of course, you need to go to the Imperial's testing station for your advanced Servox particle capacitors. And between all that, that will definitely get you your first buggy. But these days, if you're a little late to the game, check in the store, which I'll have a guide on to how to purchase and get things using the marketplace. Could really help and boost this process. But in any case, I hope you got something out of this. Thanks very much. Peace.